we just have to acknowledge this, right? So I do hear this from a lot of people that say, oh, well, we should raise the prices too cheap because it's too crowded. And I always say to people, well, who shouldn't be able to ski? Who are you trying to kick out of the sport? And that is a little bit counter if we're saying that we want to grow the sport.
Welcome to the Storm. I'm your host, Stuart Winchester. The biggest news in lift serve skiing in 2025 has been the return of Rob Katz to the CEO chair at Vail Resorts. And I am so fired up to bring you Rob's first podcast interview since that May announcement. Before we get to the interview, I want to send a sincere thank you to all of the paid subscribers to the Storm Skiing Journal and Podcast who have transformed this into a small business and a sustainable one. I know that many of you appreciate the coverage I give of smaller ski areas, but I also know that exclusive interviews like this one with one of skiing's top executives are the reason that you believe in the Storm enough to support the product with your dollars. Believe me, I appreciate we all have a limited budget and unlimited choices and obligations, and I will never take your support for independent ski journalism for granted. So thank you very much, sincerely, for that. If you are not a paid subscriber yet, you can upgrade your subscription at any time at stormskiing.com. You can also start on the free newsletter tier and upgrade later if you decide you like the Storm and want more of it. And if you really like the Storm and you're already a paid subscriber, or even if you're not, you can rep the brand with a hoodie, t-shirt, hat, and more at the Storm store at stormskiing.myshopify.com. Please follow the Storm on X and Instagram and YouTube at Storm Ski Journal. You can now watch the podcast on YouTube or stormskiing.com. You know who else supports the Storm and has for years? My friends at Profile Search International. Look, the next Rob Katz is out there somewhere, bumping chairs or running the cat overnight or transforming a small ski area's marketing. And Profile Search will help you find them. They are the ski industry talent acquisition experts, the only executive search and recruitment firm in the world that is 100% focused on the ski industry. Profile Search has used their intimate understanding of skiing and related industries and of available candidates worldwide to place hundreds of transformational leaders at the best and most progressive ski areas over the past 30 years. With offices in the US and Canada, Profile Search will find and negotiate with the right leaders for your team. You can reach out to them directly at profilesearch.com or contact them by email and phone with the information on that website, or send me a note. I will connect you directly with this expert team. You can reach me at skiing@substack.com. All right, episode 211 of the Storm Skiing Podcast. Rob Katz, Chairperson and Chief Executive Officer of Vail Resorts. My guest today is the Chairperson and Chief Executive Officer of Vail Resorts. With 42 ski areas on 3 continents, Vail Resorts is the largest ski area operator in the world. The company's Epic Pass, launched in 2008, has led the transformation of the ski season pass from a fringe locals product to a mass market product that now accounts for half of America's 60 million plus annual skier visits. He has worked with Vail Resorts since 1991, serving as CEO from 2006 to 2021, and returning to that role earlier this year. He is also a founder and board member of the Katz Amsterdam Foundation, which has donated more than $200 million to support improved access to mental and behavioral health care in mountain communities. Rob Katz is my guest. Rob, welcome back to the Storm. I know you have an incredibly busy summer as you settle back into the CEO chair. I so appreciate you taking the time today for all of my listeners and viewers. How you doing today in Colorado, Rob?
I'm doing great. Super excited. It's a beautiful day here in Colorado. And just got to finish up an amazing leadership summit where we bring together the top 500 people across the company. And that's one of the most energizing things for me in this role.
Yeah, I'm surprised how often that leadership summit comes up throughout the years. I talk to folks and travel around, and I try to ski a bunch of different Vail ski areas every year, and they all just love it. And they love being up in the mountains in the summer, I think, just as a novel thing, especially the ones who don't live up in the Rockies. So I'd imagine, you're working from home today, but you're working. I imagine you're always working. How does it feel to be back in the CEO seat, Rob? And what have you been focused on these first couple of months?
It's an interesting feeling. It feels both very familiar and very new all at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that, yeah, I'm really leaning into is the fact that the company's different than when I first came, and I'm a different leader. And the people, we have a lot of the same folks who were here before when I was CEO, but they're all in different roles. And so I think it's exciting, and I'm making the most of each of these days because yeah, it's a rare opportunity, and I feel pretty lucky to be in this seat again.
Let's focus on that change for a minute here, Rob. You said that the company's different and you're different. I want to take those things one at a time. So, yes, the company is very different. Obviously, you had 5 ski areas when you took the CEO role in 2006. Now there's 42, the Epic Pass mass market product. But if you can take us into the cultural piece a little bit, how is Vail Resorts as a company different in its feel and its approach and in its the way that you think about it than it was when you first started this job in 2006?
Yeah, I feel like there are a few things that are similar, right? Which is people are super passionate about the mountains. People are super passionate about the people they work with, and that was true 20 years ago. It's true now. I think what's different is that people have a different perspective on the industry as a whole. I think when I first came in 20 years ago, there was a lot of focus on just their resort, right? And almost like the world revolved around one resort. And many people spent their whole careers potentially at one resort. And I think now there's a different perspective because folks have had the opportunity to move to different resorts, and that's put new vitality, new energy. I think there's a broader engagement that people now feel where it's not just about their resort, it's about the industry as a whole, right? And it's about the people who work in the industry as a whole. And that passion is new and is something that even coming back from 3.5 years ago, I feel even stronger than I did a short while ago.
Yeah, well, one big difference if we zoom out and look at the world is really you were first mover, had that advantage of you just boom, 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 every year, Epic Pass, new resorts, new big resorts. Then Altera came and they've really created an awesome product you now have to compete with. Talk a little bit about that changed competitive landscape and what you're facing now versus what you were facing then.
Yeah, I think I'm thrilled about the Icon Pass. Always have been. I've said that from day one. I said when they launched the product that I thought that it would be a really good thing for us on 2 fronts. One is that it's competition and it's good competition, and that means we have to get better. And that's something you should always want in any business that you're in. And so I think that's been a boon for the entire ski industry. And 2 is when we were here before the Icon Pass, there was this dynamic where it was like Vail Resorts thinks you should ski on a season pass that you should buy before the season, but everybody else has a completely different view. And they came in and said, no, 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 actually, all these other resorts kind of agreed with where Vail Resorts was. And so what you've seen is past participation, right, in the industry skyrocket. Obviously, our program, I think, was maybe, I don't remember the exact number, 900,000 passes before then, right? We're now at 2.4 million, right? So we've obviously dramatically improved the number of passes that we sell. Today, one of the areas that we're now focused on, though, is as pass growth is maturing, which of course it would after such explosive growth for a few years, is on lift tickets. And so we're very focused on the rest of the market because there are always going to be people who are not going to buy before the season starts. And so it's one of the reasons why we launched Epic Friends, right? We really took a look at all the benefit tickets that we provide for our season pass holders and decided we needed to do something different, right? Similar approach. We're providing discounts to people who come to the resort, but we really want to make sure that it's simple, easy to understand, and an amazing discount. So we're now offering 50% off. And we feel like this is a way, it doesn't solve every single case of somebody who's buying a lift ticket, opens up that market in a massive way to really drive kind of the connection and social side of skiing. And in my mind, I think that you're going to see us really focus, not just, of course, we're going to still be looking to grow our pass business, looking to add more benefits, looking to make it better. But you're going to see us really focus on the other side of the industry, which you've talked about a lot over the years, where I think it didn't get as much attention from us historically.
So, this Epic Friend ticket, as I understand it, replaces the buddy tickets, which were variable rate percentage discounts and a little bit confusing. One of the parts of this that I think is really cool, Rob, is that the friend who uses the ticket can then take that. Let's say a lift ticket is $200 retail. They pay $100, right? Then they can take that $100, apply it toward a 2026 to 2027 Epic Pass. Now, you've had a program like this for years called Turn In Your Ticket. Almost no one knew about it, at least from my experience. So talk about that part of the program, what you hope to achieve with it, and how aggressively you're going to market it, because it was kind of like this secret thing before, or it felt like.
I think it was a terrific idea that we developed many years ago, which is to say, hey, if you bought a ticket, we'll allow you to turn it in and essentially have a credit. And we really initially focused just in March. So what we would say is, hey, if you bought a ticket in March after season pass sales had gone on for the next season, we'd say, hey, you can take a portion of that cost. I think historically it was like up to maybe $100 total. And then you could use it. And of course, the goal of that was trying to get people into the overall program. But we were a little bit skittish on promoting it and having people feel like there was this new discount out there. So I don't think we intentionally kept it secret, but we made it very personal. But now I think one of the things we're realizing is, no, this is an amazing channel, right, to entice somebody to buy, right, that Epic Friend ticket, buddy ticket. And for us, what I'd say is we still think, and we're very committed to this, that buying before the season is still the most important thing. We think, given the weather volatility in the industry, we think this is critical. And in our minds, of course, we know, some people aren't ready to do that. So this gives people a path, right? So they can get a 50% off discount and now an amazing opportunity, right, to buy a discounted pass the following year. Maybe they'll take us up on that and they'll now become the pass holder, right, that actually is then giving their, right, Epic Friend tickets to somebody else. So it's a bit of a pay it forward and kind of, social growth piece that we're looking to get with the opportunity.
So how did you settle on the half off? Did you consider other things? I don't know, one free weekday ticket or off peak or more tickets, or was there other things you considered, and ultimately why was half off what made sense to you?
I think it was simplicity. One of the things we've heard from our pass holders for a number of years is that we had both buddy tickets and ski with a friend tickets.
Yeah.
And so we had two different kinds of tickets and they had different discounts. And the way we gave the discounts were different. One was a fixed price. One was a kind of small 10 to 15% discount. They varied by resort. And so one of the top comments that we were getting from people was, this is too confusing. And so we really wanted to go to something that was simple. Everyone would know what it is every day of the season. Because that was the other thing, is that the old buddy ticket program basically provided a pretty good discount for some resorts on peak days, but actually kind of a meager discount for off-peak days. And so we wanted to say, no. Every day of the season, first day of the season, last day of the season, that's going to be 50% off. And the other thing that we used to do was only have buddy tickets for those people who bought in the spring. Yeah. We really felt like we needed to expand that. And so now we're going to be offering Epic Friend tickets to people who buy in the fall as well. Now, the people who buy in the spring get the best price. They get the most Epic Friend tickets, so that's still true. But we wanted to make this more broad-based because we think this is a way to address this issue with lift tickets, which, I fully acknowledge, right? We have too many lift tickets, too many times of the year that are probably a little too high, which makes sense given what our strategy was. But as we go forward, we're going to have to get a little more creative and a little more aggressive on how we go after that market.
I want to get back to that follow-up piece for a moment. So I know you know how to communicate to people broadly, because when there's an Epic Pass deadline coming up, you can't miss it. I mean, it is everywhere. So how much are you going to take this acuity with data that Vail has developed over the past several years and really chase down these people who redeemed a friend ticket and say, hey, you can use this to buy an Epic Pass? Because again, with the turn in the ticket, I didn't feel like that marketing follow-up was there.
Yeah, we're going to be all over this. And I think you're going to see us be all over this, both before and during the season. So we're going to try and get pass holders to use their Epic Friend ticket, which also is not something that we historically had done. Right. I think what we did and again, when I say historically, this is me, right? We viewed this as a discount and a benefit to the pass holder. But did we really want people to use those Epic Friend tickets? Of course, they're there to use, but we viewed them as a discount. Now we're saying, no, this is actually a new pathway for people who may not be as committed or as frequent skiers into the sport. So we see this as an opportunity to really grow the sport and, of course, grow the number of skiers who come to our resorts. So you're going to see us use our email channel to promote to our pass holders, hey, remember, you've got these Epic Friend tickets, right? So use them. And then once it's used, we're absolutely going to go after those folks. And I think what you're seeing for the first time is we're going to be putting this right in all our communications up front to everyone, this turn in your ticket opportunity.
Yeah, we've seen in the past where Vail has rolled out programs like the Epic Day Pass, and then you added another tier, and then you added another tier, and you've added local passes in places like Tahoe and Summit County and Vermont. To what extent, Rob, do you think that Epic Friend is a first step toward addressing the fact that walk-up headline lift ticket prices have become from my point of view, problem for the ski industry from a perception point of view?
Yeah, I think in the end, it's my view that we will probably always have a window ticket, right? That if you're really going to wait to the very last day, the last moment, yeah, that will be higher, right? And I don't know that we want to walk away from that because people have to realize that, right, the cost of allowing people to do that for the industry is high. And I think when you see the change that's happened in the industry and the health of the industry, all the capital that's being spent across the industry, all the investment that's gone in, this is because we have made the industry more secure, right? By getting so much revenue up front. We don't want to move away from that. But you're right. I do see this as a first step towards a number of other steps as to how we get more creative. And I think one of the things historically we've done is, we've been a little bit broad-based in how we price lift tickets year after year. Most of the resorts, right, kind of went up about the same. And again, all made sense while we were growing the pass business. I think what you'll see in this season is a more resort by resort, time period by time period approach, where of course we're going to have certain, window lift ticket prices and advanced lift ticket prices go up, but you may see us actually reduce prices at certain times of the year. So kind of use the same approach and the sophistication that we've had in the season pass business, start to bring that into the lift ticket business.
So I don't want to draw a line that's not there, and I don't want to assume things. But your press release, Vail's press release I think it was your Q3, the last one you did in June. It was pretty explicit about the fact that outsized impact, a decline in lift ticket sales, and it didn't say if those were window tickets or advanced purchase, but it says lift tickets, so I'm assuming all of them, had an outsized impact on visitation to your destination resorts. So I want to step back, and I think this is a response to that, but why do you think lift ticket sales declined last year? And is this part of your response to get out of this?
Yes, absolutely. So I think the conclusion you drew is right, that that we do feel like our lift ticket, it was one thing I think when you looked at season pass growth of 10 or 20% a year, or 40 or 50, which we had a couple of years. So of course, we're going to see lift ticket sales decline in those years because converting people over from lift tickets to passes. But as the pass business has gotten more mature, no, we want to see strength and growth in our lift ticket business as well. And so this is a response to that. And I think we do have to just get more aggressive and lean in further, right, in terms of how we bring people in through that channel as well. And I think this is as we talked about, this is kind of a first step, I think, ultimately towards many. Why did our lift ticket business, decline? I think, but simply a lack of focus. It wasn't where our attention was going. I think certainly the pricing, I think, was out there that I think made a difference. And I think we have to be thoughtful, but again, lean in on pricing as well. I also think that we need to elevate the resort brands themselves. I think when you look back over a number of years, what you see is we put a lot of effort into the Epic brand because it made sense. That's what we were driving in terms of season pass sales. But now of course, as we're moving to lift tickets, those are sold resort by resort. And so we have to elevate our resort brands in our marketing effort, which I think you'll see us do much more of this year, both in terms of how we sell lift tickets and how we sell passes. And so I think that was another component of it that again, we had an amazing run on how we grew and transformed the pass business, but that has to come to a lot of other parts of our business now too.
Yeah, drilling into those numbers from last season a little more here, Rob. The statistic that alarmed me the most was that overall your skier visits at Vail Resorts declined 1.5%, while the industry overall in the U.S., their skier visits increased 3%, and Vail makes up about 20 to 25% of skier visits. So that's a pretty big gap. How much did that alarm you? And did that and other performance factors relate to you stepping back into the CEO role?
Yeah, I guess I'm going to break that up. I feel like absolutely, when you look at those statistics, a piece of that is that the Midwest and I think the Southeast did really well last year. And obviously our market share in those, even though we do have resorts there, our market share in those markets are much lower, right? So it is, I think that's true. And when you look at the Rockies, which is where we have most of our resorts, obviously the biggest resorts, the Rockies did not grow last year. Now, that said, our overall performance was worse than the industry. Absolutely. And yeah, that's unacceptable. I mean, we have to, we've got so many amazing tools, so much data, this incredible, talented team across the, enterprise that no, of course, we want to be a leader in that, actually growing our market share and certainly keeping up. And so what I'd say alarming, no, because I see it as we've had this incredible run, and it's, of course, you're going to have some down years. You're not going to have, great years every single year. And this past year was a down year. I think in terms of the leadership change, I think that's much more about, overall, the board felt like it was time for a change, and given the overall, both internal and external environment, that I was kind of the right person to come in this moment. A part of it is that, but of course it's a much broader based decision.
Did the board consider, and I realize you're part of the board, a CEO search, but decided expediency just to get this thing going?
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on kind of the internal board dialogue. But a conclusion that I was the right person for this moment for the company and what needs to happen.
So what made you take the role? Because you could have said, not my problem. I did my job. I grew this company 10x. I'm going to go kick my feet up somewhere. But you took the challenge. Why?
As you mentioned earlier, I've been around this company now 34 years.
Okay.
I was, CEO and then chair, for 20 years. I have a huge amount of passion, right? Both for this company and for the industry. And I felt like if there was a role that I could play that could make a difference and help, then that absolutely was, what I was going to do. I mean, and in a way, right, obviously there's good competition and of course, friendly banter between all the different players. But like I said earlier, the fact that Icon has done well is good for the industry and good for Vail Resorts long term. Mm-hmm. And I think actually for the industry, it's important for Vail Resorts to be on its front foot as well. And if I can help make that happen, that's important to me.
All right, let's take a quick break from Rob because not everyone has the marketing muscle that Vail does. If your marketing needs a fresh perspective from industry experts or better storytelling, rebranding, or advertising, then I would suggest you reach out to my friends at Bonfire Collective, a fractional marketing team that collaborates with ski areas and outdoor brands. Well, what does that mean? That means that Bonfire can help you rethink your approach in ways that can turbocharge your business. We're talking a lot of numbers here with Rob. Here's an impressive stat for you. Bonfire Collective took over the marketing at one small New Hampshire ski area. They doubled the revenue in just 3 years. That is not easy to do in the ski business. When I was ready here at the Storm to launch my first digital marketing campaign last year, I used Bonfire. And you know what? It freaking worked really, really well. I could not be happier with the results. And I think you will be too. Not only was the campaign great, The folks are great to work with. They are responsive, they are timely, they are friendly, they are creative. To get started, you're going to want to talk to Eric at Bonfire Collective. He was a co-founder of Bluebird Backcountry in Colorado. It was the first human-powered ski area. Eric came on the pod and talked about that. It's an awesome story. He knows the ski business. Visit bonfirecollective.com, or I will be happy to make that connection for you. All right, back to Rob and Vail. So let's talk about what you're bringing into the office. What Vail Resorts looked like 25, 30 years ago, when you're going back to 1991, it's a completely different company now, right? I'd imagine you're a different person as well, because I think it would be hard to drive that sort of change if you weren't also wired to make that sort of personal transformation yourself. So, I realize it's hard to talk about yourself, but I listen to a lot of folks who talk about self-improvement and mindfulness and leadership style and optimizing their life and there's all these different ways you can go with this. But how do you think that you have changed as a leader? Is there any particular philosophies you live by or any management style or things you've tried to change? And I realize it's very broad, but I'm trying to get at, how has Rob Katz evolved from 1991 to 2006 and to now?
Well, in 1991, I was 24.
Right.
so a lot has happened since 1991. Yeah. But maybe I'll start it when I joined as CEO. Yeah. So I was 39 years old. I had a lot of passion for the ski industry. I knew the company well because I had been around it for 15 years, but not inside the company. And I had a real passion for leadership. It was one of the reasons why I wound up, I was working in private equity in New York. And one of the reasons why I left to move to Boulder was actually not about Vail Resorts, but it was really about to kind of take a different path with my career and my own passion for, this kind of more personal connection and building culture. And so when I got to the company, that was, one of my top priorities. And I felt like the good news about the ski industry is that people, again, are really passionate about the sport. Yeah. But there wasn't a lot of passion around helping people develop in their careers. There wasn't a lot of passion about having the ski industry be a place where you could come and then really flourish. It was like you just had to hope that, you would somehow make it along some Byzantine path. And the guy or gal, it was mostly guys at that point, in front of you would just quit. That was it. And so to me, I felt like, wait a minute, there's so much raw, amazing energy that if we could point it right towards leadership, point it towards connection, we could really make a difference. That was the good part. The bad part, though, is I think I didn't understand really, because it doesn't come up in private equity a lot, about what teamwork really is. Okay. So a little bit for me was I'm going to do this myself. Mm-hmm. And so I think those first couple of years, and plenty of examples out there, right, on, me really trying to be a change agent, but not necessarily bringing enough people along on that journey. And while I think we made some good efforts and some, good foundational things in those first couple of years, we really didn't get anything going. And it wasn't until I started to understand that, this is too big a company. This isn't a solo journey. And so I have to rely on other people. I have to bring in other people. And even the Epic Pass, which everybody talks about as this, great idea. Yeah, it was a good idea. But ultimately, the only way we made it work was that we brought the rest of our resorts behind it. And that couldn't be done by an edict. We had to go out and get, and at that point, only 5 resorts. Sounds like not a lot, but man, it didn't feel like that at the time. So I think when I think about myself, at 39 coming in as CEO versus today, it is this recognition that it's a lot less about me. Mm-hmm. That I'm, kind of I set an intention, I set a direction, but I have to make sure I've got great people around me and an amazing culture, and people feeling passionate and optimistic about where we're going and empowered. And that, I think I'm in a much better, maybe wiser spot today.
Yeah. Did you sense a morale issue when you came back? Was it different?
I think so. I mean, I think I had a sense of that. Been a number of challenges that the company has gone through over the last couple of years. And it's a company, I think that was used to winning on a lot of fronts. And so I think those setbacks, both private, some of them very public setbacks, mm-hmm. I think, absolutely demoralizing. And I would say, what's interesting is it wasn't just demoralizing at the corporate office or, If you talk about Park City, from last year, but it was broad based because I think actually the good news is we built this dynamic where people care about the company as a whole.
Yeah.
And so when the company as a whole, is maybe feels like it's on its back foot, then yeah, people are, yeah, they get disillusioned a little bit. And so I think one of the things for me is, yeah, rebuilding, right, that core confidence, which is, when we make mistakes, we've got to own those mistakes. We've got to talk about them, say we're going to change and grow, but that can't, kind of get us off track in terms of continuing to innovate.
Yeah, the public things, those make headlines even in New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and everyone knows about them. There's some more background stuff that I track and that my listeners are really interested in. And one of those things is the Epic Pass. Like you said, you had a great run. Maybe it was too good of a run. From 2015 to 2019, you went from 12 ski areas on the Epic Pass to 61. And since 2019, that's kind of leveled off. I think you're at 64 or 65. So how can you move it back to growth mode? I'm not saying that you're going to grow at that same rate ever, because I don't know if there's enough ski areas in the world to do that. But how do you get back to growth mode, and is that important to you?
Yeah, I would say I think the growth mode piece that you're talking about is very important to me, and I think very important to all of us, but it's more broad based, right, than just about the number of resorts that are on the Epic Pass. That's one measure. But other measures are, how are we growing visits? Is the industry growing in visits? How are we growing our other lines of business? How are we growing leaders within the company? How are we innovating broadly, like things like My Epic Gear? Right. So to me, like those are the things that indicate growth. Because I would say, yes, of course, like we have 60 resorts on it. Adding a couple more resorts, how much of a difference does that make? Right. In terms of the average skier who's on our pass. I think some people might like seeing that we added some resorts, and it was great to add new partners, right, just a little while ago in Austria. But how many of our skiers are going to go to those resorts? Yeah, you and I both know it's very small, right, in terms of the number of people going. So I want to make sure that we keep our eye on like what really is important. By the way, a key thing that I saw over the last couple of years that has been amazing is our seasonal retention rate, right? And our seasonal engagement scores, which actually have been the highest they've ever been. And in the end of the day, that's growth to me. So to me, that is our company moving forward. And in the midst of some of these other, like you said, the public challenges and blah, 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 which you might think means, oh, all these people are really not in a good spot. But actually, the numbers would suggest the people broadly at the company are. That doesn't mean there's not still places to improve, but yeah, those employee components are big, important areas for growth for us.
Yeah. So to stay on the resort point for a minute, I think the right resort could make a big difference. Like if you were to sign Jackson Hole, for example. So what we've seen, and there were some very deliberate statements by you and others around the fact that you liked the ownership model as opposed to the partner model as a preference, right? And that, I realize there's a lot of nuance to that, and you can feel free to talk about that. But it seems from my chair that Vail has, over the past few years, seeded North American partner growth to Icon. And I say that just based on the fact that you lost A Basin to Icon, you lost Sun Valley, you lost Snow Basin. The first one happened under you, the second one happened under Kirsten, your successor. And if you look at the overall numbers, right now, if you have an Icon Pass, you get 33 ski areas in the West as options. Not all destinations, but you only get 11 on Epic. The numbers in Canada are 8 Icon, 5 Epic. How can you better compete for North American-owned partners? Because what I almost envision, Rob, is, if the NBA's contract is up, ESPN and CBS or whatever are competing for that. And I want to see the same thing in skiing. I want to see you fighting Alterra for Big Sky and Jackson Hole. So how do you better compete for these marquee resorts that you don't own? And you have Telluride, and that's great, but Alterra has literally everything else.
Yeah, well, I would say it's important to calibrate around the resorts that we do have, because I think, right, every resort doesn't have the same impact, right? And so I think, when you're counting like that, it sounds like, oh, well, 5 here, 7 there. When you talk about Canada and you talk about like who has what resort, well, obviously, when you have Whistler in Canada, right, it is, right, not only the biggest resort, right, in North America, it is probably as a business, right, the largest resort in the world,
Yeah.
right? When you look at it all, local currency. So we're very focused. We look at every single resort as what is the impact? How many people does that impact? How does that, right, move the needle for our pass holders and our guests? How incremental would people view adding a resort like that? And yes, to your earlier point about, the NBA and ESPN and TNT competing. Well, by the way, we also, of course, we care about what it would cost. And so, in the end of the day, if it's not adding value for us, right? If a partner wants so much money or terms that don't make sense for us, we are happy to see that. I think it's important to remember that, yeah, in this kind of race with Icon, so to speak, as you're pointing or as you're positioning it, like we started with, yes, right, the biggest, most popular, strongest brands in the industry. When you look at the top five or top seven, and so that it's and we were not trying to get every resort, right? Before Icon ever showed up, we were not out there trying to run around getting every resort because we understand that again, that's not it's just not bigger is better in that way. It's like how do we drive thoughtful growth where it really makes sense? I think from skiers, like the key thing is that a lot of these best resorts are on one of the two products, right? So people feel like they can choose. So I think from an industry perspective, I think that's fine. And we're of course like always happy to talk to a Jackson Hole, like about joining our product. And we also understand that for some resorts, it could be about money. It could be about other things, right? That they just want a different perspective or something that makes sense for them. Some of these deals are also very long-term deals that were set up, when Icon first was put together. So for me, I would say this kind of it makes good headlines, but it isn't necessarily what's driving the business or necessarily driving the improved experience for
Mhm.
skiers.
Yeah, I think I'd have a lot better understanding of that, Rob, if you started releasing per resort skier visit numbers again. So if you want to send those over to me, I'll make those
Well, but
analyses.
my guess is you have a sense of that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I feel like when the Epic Pass launched, you kind of took everyone off guard. Again, first mover advantage, and you just added resorts. And it took a long time to figure out how to respond to you guys. And it wasn't until the Mountain Collective came along, and that was great, but it's 2 days. I mean, it's not a serious competitor on that scale. But Icon, when they finally got it together in 2018 to 19, really the narrative flipped within a couple years of Vail versus everyone, kind of everyone taking on Vail. It almost seemed like they were ganging up on you. Like you have Altera and Powder and Boyne and all the big independents. Do you feel like an underdog now? And if so, does that help motivate you?
I feel a little bit like an underdog more broadly, right? Where
Yeah.
obviously we've had, yeah, negative sentiment about the company, in some cases fair, in some cases I think probably not fair, and negative investor sentiment, questions about growth, not just about us, but growth in the industry overall. And everything's played out and it was a great innovation, but maybe it was too good of a run and all of
Mhm.
that. So for me personally, yes, it does motivate me because I feel like it's not that different from when I went in as CEO the first time when, oh, by the way, everybody thought this was a crappy business and there was no way to grow. So I do feel that. And I would say this other thing, which is, an innovation that I think is different, right? For us is that we have, right? You look at our, Epic Day Pass versus the Icon, Session Pass or their
Mhm.
frequency product. And what you see with us is we are providing much lower prices and a much broader base, right? That we are attacking in terms of that advanced commitment program. And it's because we own our resorts, right? It's much more difficult for Icon. And again, I don't, I don't begrudge this. But their strategy makes it more difficult to offer a 1 day advanced lift ticket product or a 2 day or a 3 day. Even what we just announced today in terms of offering 50% off lift tickets,
Yeah.
because in our model, like we're owning the resort, so we can do that. Then we're taking that lift ticket, right, and crediting against a pass for the following year. When you look at the Epic Friend program in total, right, it's actually a much more compelling opportunity, and it's because we own our resorts. I'm not saying Icon couldn't do it, maybe they'll figure it out, but they've got to then work with each of those resorts to figure out how do they make something right that actually systemically holds. Where for us, because most of our resorts are in our system, we have much more flexibility to do that. And I think as you look to the future, you're going to see us leveraging that, leaning in more and more. Even our Epic Mountain Rewards program with 20% off, right? All of the products at all of our resorts is something again easier for us to do because we have right we have ownership of it, so we can trade right, money from one pocket to another to get to an overall better result.
Yeah, the pricing definitely gives you a lot of flexibility and power. I mean, owning gives you flexibility with pricing. A lot of investors I speak with, and they'll talk to me off the record, but they say they think the price is too low, and there is about a 30% differential between most Epic and most Icon Pass prices in your favor, right? Epic is generally much cheaper. You dropped prices 20% ahead of 21, 22. Before that, you were pretty much on par with Icon. In hindsight, Rob, was that the right decision?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we made a decision at that point that we wanted to get more people into the program, and that, we had an amazing, for the analytics geeks out there, right? The year before, like, how did this all come about? The year before, we gave people credits because of the shortened season for COVID.
Mhm.
And the credits were a variable scale, right? Depending on how many days you skied, what product you had, all of that. And that gave us the following year, when we saw like how return rates and new purchase rates showed up, we had this perfect price elasticity curve, which I'm sure we'll never have again, probably for passes or for any product. And what that told us was, wait a minute, we're not at the right price. And so ultimately, like, we felt like there was an opportunity for us to reduce price and actually drive the business in a stronger, better way. It drove a lot of growth, right? And of course, over the last couple of years, you can't grow 50%, right, and expect to get the same growth you had before. So of course, we stole some growth from future years to pull it forward. And yeah, now of course we do feel like we've had some room to be a little bit more aggressive on the pricing as we've gone forward. And of course, the inflation dynamic was different too for a couple of years there. But we do feel good about it. And I think you're going to see us, right? Our approach here is not, and I do talk to a lot of the same investors, of course, and they say, some investors say it's too high, some investors say it's too low.
Okay.
What I try and share with them is that we're using a pretty complicated and sophisticated assessment, right, of how do we maximize revenue in total over the long run. And in our minds, I've had people telling me, oh, we should raise the Epic Pass price because the people who buy the Epic Pass, they could pay $200-$300 more. It's true, but a bunch of people will then downgrade, right, from the Epic Pass to the Epic Global Pass. And so when we're looking at it, we're trying to say, hey, what is the right pricing for us to get the maximum opportunity? Now, that said, when you look historically, the pricing between our products, yeah, I mean, a lot of it was anchored all the way back to the Epic Pass from 2008. And so we're constantly going to look at, are there opportunities to maximize that? We're not wed to being higher or lower than Icon, and we're wed to, hey, what do we think maximizes things?
So despite that price differential, Epic Pass unit sales decreased for the first time for the 2024 to 25 ski season. Revenue did continue to go up, and it wasn't a big decline, but what do you attribute that unit decline to, Rob? And how concerning was it for you?
Yeah, I think I would say two things. One is what I said earlier, right? We grew, we took a program that a lot of people thought was mature,
Mm-hmm.
right, in 2021, and we grew it by another 40 to 50%. So, of course, you're going to give back some of that. So, when we did the price reduction, it wasn't that surprising that a bunch of people rushed into the product, right? And now all of a sudden, a couple of years in, they're like, oh, I was enthusiastic because it was just 20% off, but am I still as committed? I mean, the fact that actually we've retained, I mean, essentially, we are still above, right, that first year after we went out. We didn't actually lose as many people. Candidly, we thought we might actually lose more people in that second year, kind of, hey, it's not on sale anymore.
Yeah.
So we feel good about that. But I think the second thing is that, and I shared this, broadly on our investor conference call, which is, I think that our marketing, right, we are an amazing email marketer, right? We really one of the best, I think, in the country, an incredible legacy there of how we've used data and personalized and used our product portfolio. But let's face it, right? Email doesn't have the power that it once was. There are other channels that people are using to get their information. And I think, right, we have to be as strong in these other channels as we've been on email. The marketing landscape over the last 2 to 3 years has shifted dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's a place that we have to be as well. And so I think that, is that a big difference in terms of, season pass? No, but of course, when you're talking about trying to get growth of 2-3%, you're getting a decline of -1. Well,
Hmm.
no, that it is a big deal. And so it's one of the areas that I'm really focused on is like, how do we make sure that we've got this kind of marketing preeminence, which is not just about ads, it's about pricing, promotion. It's about, do we have the right products for the right people, communicating with them where they want to hear about it?
So picking up on the product itself for a minute here, I don't know that I think the Epic Pass is too cheap, but I think some access is cheap, especially compared to your competitors, and that's great because Vail has again mainstreamed the idea of a season pass. It used to be this elite locals product that was $2,000, and you only had it if you skied 100 days a year. Now everyone has a season pass, and it's awesome. But when I go to places like Okemo, Mount Snow, Breckenridge, Stevens Pass, those are all unlimited on the Epic Local Pass. Right now, that pass sells for $7.99. Look at competitors near those mountains, Stratton, Arapahoe Basin, Crystal. Those are only unlimited on a full Icon Pass, which is $1,429. So, not quite twice the price, maybe 40% more. It's been years since Vail has made any access adjustments, and Altera does this almost every year, little tweaks here and there. And just to address volume, why not? And is this something that you can look at a little more closely? Because your leaders on the ground are pretty consistent with, yeah, we look at it every year, but I'm just not seeing that reflected in the product.
Yeah, so I'd say a couple of things. One is we do look at it all the time. I think our primary goal, though, is to put money into the mountain to alleviate the bottlenecks.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the end, I think this is like a broader point, right? And I think we should talk about what you just said. So to the extent that we take access and we make it more limited, or we take the price up to make the mountain less crowded, what does that really mean? That means that and you're saying Icon is doing it too. That means what we're trying to do is get people not to ski.
Yeah.
So that runs counter. I mean, we just have to acknowledge this, right? So I do hear this from a lot of people that say, oh, well, we should raise the prices too cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say it because it's too crowded. And I always say to people, well, who shouldn't be able to ski?
Right.
Who are you trying to kick out of the sport? And that is a little bit counter if we're saying that we want to grow the sport. And by the way, you talk to everybody in the industry and everybody talks about how they have all these programs, and to get beginners in. We have all these programs to try and get groups who have historically not skied in. How do we do this? And then at the same time, they're saying, oh, but we can't have that many people. And so we have to do things to kick people out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not saying that there aren't moments where that's true and we have to look at them as well. And of course, we want to protect the experience. But I think that has to be an incredibly, to your point about, yes, we're not going to remove access so quickly because where are those people going to go?
Yeah.
Right? So if we take the Epic Local Pass and we restrict Okemo, right, or Stowe, well, Stowe is, but Okemo, well, then they're going to go to Mount Snow. So then we say, oh, well, you have to restrict Mount Snow. Or what about Hunter? What about now where are they going? So now are they going to just your smaller resorts, which obviously can't handle the volume? So I think when you take a step back, this is not so simple, unless your view is, yeah, that this sport should be an elite sport,
Mm-hmm.
right? It really isn't for everyone, that it's more of a country club. Well, then that kind of, thinking makes sense. But to the extent you're thinking, no, we want to grow the sport, we want to make it more accessible. No, then you should be really cautious before you try and kick people out of skiing. To me, that doesn't mean that there aren't important ways to protect the experience. And I think we do have to do that. But man, what you said about the fact that we don't do that often, no, that is absolutely a strategy because we feel like every time we do that, it means, yeah, we're probably telling some family not to come. Now, I would also say that it's important to remember that these ski resorts, the number of days, right, that you're talking about that this concern exists is very rarely more than a couple of days per season.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a season that, depending on where you are, it could be 60 days, 90 days, could be 150 days. But of all those days, right, there's only a couple, right? The lines that people post on social media about, Chair 5 at Vail or whatever. Well, fine. But you know what? That is one moment in time at one resort on one day, probably for a couple of hours. And I think as an industry, we need to understand that there's gonna be some lines. And I think when you look at other, location-based entertainment things, whether it's theme parks or Disney or whatever, yeah, people understand that at some moments in time, you're gonna have lines. And the key thing for us is how do we manage that and improve that experience while still keeping the doors open to this industry?
So let's talk about the ways to protect that experience Rob, because I was really surprised with when the whole situation in Park City was going down with the patrol strike over the holidays last year. And we don't need to rehash that whole thing. But I was really surprised to go online and see I could still buy a lift ticket for $328 when the status page of Park City was showing the mountain at something like 30% open, when the surrounding resorts were all more like 70-ish% open. So, mountains are only so big and they have a capacity. So how do you acknowledge that while still being true to this epic for everyone philosophy and not kicking people out of skiing, as you say?
Yeah, I would say it is a tough dynamic. And I think I can't speak to exactly, well, I wasn't CEO and I can't speak to exactly, what the decisions were during that moment, but I'll talk about it more broadly. I think it is something, again, it sounds good to say that you're not going to sell lift tickets. If you feel like the mountain is too crowded or going to have some, and that's something that we're going to continue to reserve the right to do. But like I said before, if you think, and again, I wasn't involved in this, but if a moment like that happened again, well, you'd be thinking, okay, well, you have people who are in Park City now, who, despite what's going on, want to get on the mountain, and now you're telling them they've already paid for their hotel, they've already paid for their flight to come out, they've paid for their restaurants, and now you're saying, no, you can't. And I think, again, of course, Deer Valley historically has done that, and that's great, but. So if Deer Valley is saying, hey, we've got a cap and you can't come to our mountain, so then where are people going to go? Well, Park City. Now, if we say, oh, well, we're not going to let you in either, now think about like that experience as a vacation. And so I'm not saying, again, what I'd say about this is I think it is important that we do protect the experience. There's also a safety component that's important for us to ensure, right, that we are not putting anybody at risk. But again, you are really hurting people's experience to a much greater degree. And you just have to be thoughtful about it. And it is not, for us, it is not about that extra, dollar of that lift ticket. It is about, wait a minute, what is the right guest service experience in that moment? To me, I think if you have warning, right, that to me is where it's a little bit easier. Well, hey, we know that these days are going to be packed. So we're telling everybody, hey, wait a minute, be forewarned, right, before you get here, before you come. But obviously, the Park City strike was a situation, right, where it was a little bit, thrown upon us. So, I'm not saying that we don't do it. We do it. It is important to us. We will cap it, but it's also something that we're thinking about all the other angles to this as well.
Yeah, it's incidents like that I think end up doing outsized damage to the brand, and the brand is so important here. I think there's a reason this is Vail Resorts, right? Because it evokes this wonderful mountain, one of my favorite mountains. I'm sure anyone who's skied there say the same. Alterra is just Alterra. What does that mean? I think it means something about a mountain, but I don't know. And it doesn't do anything for me, right? So it's sort of like Apple's done this great job. If you buy an Apple product, it's going to come in this beautiful package. It's going to be open. So let me tell you about a ski trip I took a couple years ago, and I just want you to react to this. So I'm not a local anywhere, but I ski about 50 to 60 ski areas a year. So that gives me the benefit of context, but it also means I kind of get what I get. And I had planned a ski trip to the Mid-Atlantic. So I hit a bunch of ski areas in Pennsylvania, Maryland, West Virginia, and I started at Liberty, which Vail owns. For the listeners, I know you know that, but it was open, but there was a lot of bare spots. Went over to Whitetail, same, they were doing their best. There was a whole pod closed. Went to Laurel, one trail open. You own all three of those, by the way, for the listeners. Went to Seven Springs the next day. It was open, but, it sort of patched together. Hidden Valley was closed altogether. So, I'm like, okay, it's been warm. I expected that. But then I went down to Wisp in Maryland, which is run by Pacific Group Resorts. They were doing a little better. And then I went down into West Virginia, and I come down the corner of this mountain pass, the way you approach, and you can see these two ski areas side by side. Canaan Valley, which is owned by the state of West Virginia, and Timberline, which is owned by the family that runs Perfect North, your competitor in Indiana, to Paoli Peaks. And it was wall to wall, top to bottom, 1,000 vertical feet, much bigger than your PA ski areas. And I got there, and they got a brand new 6-pack, and they have a giant snow cannon every 30 yards. It was like a brand new ski area. And I was like, wow, this is what this is something that I'm still talking about 3 years later. But I think you should get that experience at a Vail Resort, but you often don't, especially outside of the mainstream areas. Like I had a great day at Stowe this year, but less great days at other places. So how do you make people say, wow, Rob, how do you knock their socks off? Because that experience I had at Timberline, I don't think that a little independent operator, and I love the Perfect Family and Jonathan Davis and all those folks, but I don't think they should be doing better than you. But frankly, on that particular day in that region, they were.
Yeah, it is hard to respond about one, day in one region and why or what their snowmaking system is versus ours or what the temps
Mhm.
were. And it does, and this, right? It shifts a lot. I would also say that I don't think like there are, what is the current number, like 550 ski areas in the US or something like that, right?
Mhm.
Something like that. And, of that, you probably have 400, or more, right? Kind of local or urban, small ski areas. Like I am very confident, right, that our company is doing way better, right, than the vast majority of all of these resorts in terms of the consistency of what we provide, in terms of the experience, in
Mhm.
terms of the snowmaking, in terms of consistency of the talent and the team that are there. But
Yeah.
I also want to acknowledge that no, there's always going to be a resort that does an amazing job. And I think we have to be who we are, right? And there'll be some days I guarantee you that we can go back out and see that our resort's in a much better spot, or we've been more consistent or retained our staff right through the entire season where other people may not have, even though, right, yeah, because the weather was bad, right? So there are things that we're doing at our resorts that I think are actual competitive advantages for us, and I think better for the guest in terms of consistency. But I also, I want to acknowledge that there are a number of independent ski areas that are great, right? And I don't, I kudos to them. I don't know the exact details, but I would say to you, yeah, that we feel, yeah, that it is, our mission is right, creating an experience of a lifetime, and so we do want that to be the case. You talked about Apple earlier, and I agree. I think there's work to be done on our brand, especially the Epic brand, and maybe the Vail Resorts brand, although to your point, like the Vail brand itself is pretty strong. I think the difference between us and Apple is that Apple operates like indoors. So we operate outdoors, right? And
Right.
all these safety and other dynamics that we're trying to work through in a business that is very up and down and has these peaks and valleys. And so, yeah, to me, like when I hear a story like what you said, I think to myself, yeah, there's probably ways that we can do better, but I don't look at it as, oh my gosh, somebody else had a great day or a great product on that day, and that means anything about right, the quality of what we stand for and represent.
I want to give you a chance to respond to something that I've harped on quite a bit in my articles over the past couple of years. I really appreciate your culture of internal promotion, and everyone that I talk to at Vail Resorts at every level does as well, because they know they have a future, and that relates back to what you said your mission was as a leader earlier on in this conversation. If you look at the amount of change, though, it's been huge. 32 general manager changes since 2022, 22 since 2023, 13 since 2024. Interestingly, none since you took back over as CEO, as far as I'm aware. I think Liberty has a vacancy. But anyway, I think that goes back to just expertise with the mountain, familiar with the Mountain Ops team, but a lot of community relations and these community relations problems that we've seen sort of bedevil the company around the country. I'm curious if you think this is something that maybe you need to have a slightly different approach to, or if I'm missing something and this culture of moving people around a lot works.
Yeah, we're huge believers in it. I think that it provides one for the people right, we have 50,000, 55,000 people right in the company.
Yeah.
The fact that people know that there's opportunities, right? That creates an entirely different culture and sense. And you're talking about how you've heard that, right? When you look at what's happening at most other places, there's almost no movement at all.
Yeah.
We do think about like, hey, what's the impact of moving somebody, Shannon Bueller moving from Stowe, right, to Keystone. So yeah, she hadn't been there, right, that long. So the question is, should you keep somebody like that there? But on the other hand, she's such a terrific talent, would be like the perfect, GM and COO for Keystone. that, yeah, we feel like, no, that is the right decision, even though it makes for an additional change. And the reason for that is I think it's not about one person, right? There's an entire team at stake. And so the fact that the GM changes, right, or the COO changes, no, there's all these other people with relationships. Just like, right, we're moving other people as well. The key is like when you look at that senior team, how much stability and longevity do you have there? And I think when I look at the Stowe team, I see a really strong team, right, with a lot of years in that community. So it's not just about one person. But once you start like saying, hey, we're going to keep everybody where they are, like the whole kind of system shifts. And now all of a sudden, you're not really promoting the best talent. You're not giving people that opportunity. I do think, though, for us, it's been about having an alignment, right? It is, yes, every GM is a little different. But by the way, right, a Mike Giorgio can call Shannon Bueller anytime, right? And they can call, right, a Bobby Murphy anytime. They're still in the company, right? We have long tenure, right, within our company. So that talent and that resident knowledge and even relationships, if we need to bring in somebody else to make a call or sit down with somebody, we do it. So in my mind, I think it's honestly one of the most important signs of health within our company. And I think it's something I think the rest of the industry needs to start to gravitate towards this, right? Which is like season pass, right? Which is, it took a while, but eventually people kind of came around.
Right.
This focus on talent and career progression, if people think they can grow within the industry, we will attract the best talent. If people think there's no upward mobility, you're not going to get the best talent. And I think we're a sport we deserve, right, to have the best people, most passionate, and people who want to see their career progress. So I'm super proud of that.
Yeah, let me throw props to the Stowe team because I was really surprised that they extended their season because Stowe never does that. Not Vail, never. And I skied there in April, an awesome day. Leave me with this, Rob. The epic lift upgrade, because my listeners really want to know about this stuff. It was great and it was well reviewed, and those 22, 23 lifts, whatever it was, very crucial. It's really slowed down the number of lifts that Vail's been installing in North America. Why is that? And can we expect you to get back to some of this more high profile capital investment soon?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, I think it's kind of like what we talked about with season pass sales and tracking growth. Yeah. So we kind of pulled forward a lot of upgrades, of course, right? We did, 22 lifts or 24. I can't remember what the exact number was. Well, of course, that means that some of the lifts, even from an approval or regulatory process perspective, it takes more time. So we pulled forward all the things that were in the pipeline and did it to get skiers and riders, right, the best experience as soon as possible. But by the way, the amount of our capital spending, right, and the number of lifts that we're doing are very consistent now with what we were doing before we did the Epic Lift upgrade, right? We haven't reduced overall spending. But I do think and I understand it, and it's fine. Like, it's a little bit like, had we done 15 lifts in the Epic Lift upgrade, that still would have been a pretty amazing thing. Mm-hmm. And then could we have done more lifts in every year after? Yeah, we could have. And maybe is that better? I think if we can accelerate projects and get people, right, that improvement earlier, the better. We stand ready to, we don't have time today, but of course, right, there are places that we still want to put in new lifts with capital at the ready. And of course, we need the community piece, right, to allow us to kind of move forward with that as well. But in our minds, no, we're never going to back away from improving the guest experience.
Well, anytime you do have time to talk about those, Rob, I am here for you. I appreciate all the time. I know you got to run. Best of luck with the turnaround. I really like this announcement today. Really, really cool way to change the narrative around lift tickets. So maybe you'll get me to stop talking about the $300 ones pretty soon. Thanks. Have a great day,
That's
Rob.
my goal.
That was Rob Katz, Chairperson and Chief Executive Officer of Vail Resorts. That was awesome, Rob. So good to have you back, both here on the podcast and in charge of the biggest company in skiing. Cannot wait to see what you do with it. I know that's a tough act to follow, but I have got tons more pods on the way for you, including conversations with the leaders of Killington, A-Basin, Sugarloaf, Waterville Valley, Stowe, Loveland, Snowmass, Taos, Purgatory, and many more. You will want to subscribe to the Storm Skiing newsletter at stormskiing.com to get those conversations the moment they are live. You can also follow the Storm on X, Instagram, and YouTube at Storm Ski Journal. Check out the video version of this pod. It is awesome. Until next time, stay well, stay safe. I am Stuart Winchester, and I'll talk to you again very soon.
The Storm Skiing Podcast is a Quicksilver Films production.